Welcome back to the campfire. Take a seat. Hope you're ready for another original horror tonight. If your blood runs cold, just get a little bit closer to the flames. More crying, wailing the likes of which Megumi had never heard before. She sat up in bed, covered in a sweat that made her shiver. Rain pelted her window and the aluminum roof. Metallic pings rang throughout the box that was her one-room apartment and banged their way into her skull. The screaming ended. Megumi stayed awake, wondering if she had actually heard those sounds coming from outside or not. In the dark room, she made out the rough forms of her dresser by the wall, of the pile of dirty clothes by the foot of her bed, of the litter box in the corner by the front door. Her cat, Latte, was nowhere to be found. He was probably fast asleep in the pile of clothes, oblivious to the horrible noises. The screams started again. They were coming from right outside the window behind her bed, the high-pitched and tortured shriek of a woman. Megumi pulled the covers off and got out of bed. Her feet touched the cold floor and a pinprick sensation shot through her soles. It made her teeth hurt. Latte meowed from behind her on the bed, apparently there the whole time. She went over to the window and pushed the curtain out of the way. A single streetlight burned white in the darkness. The rain fell in heavy torrents, blanketing the world in obscurity. The screaming was coming from the river that ran adjacent to the 5-story apartment complex that she lived in. The rain beat loudly against the building, so loud that Megumi questioned why she was able to hear the screams in the first place. She squinted into the darkness. As if responding to her attempt to see more, a figure came into view below the streetlight. Megumi could see white and red coloring of the clothing, which looked vaguely like a robe. She was holding a bundle in front of her, rocking back and forth, walking in fidgeting movements. That's just the rain making it look that way. The figure screamed again and fell to her knees. She lifted the bundle up and struck it against the ground. Megumi was glued to the window. She wished somebody would run out there and help the woman. It wasn't going to be her, that was for sure. She overcame her inaction and reached for her phone by the bedside table, dialed the police and told them about the woman. They assured her somebody would be sent out soon to check. She hung up and kept looking out the window. Latte jumped up on the sill and nuzzled her elbow with his nose. She absent-mindedly scratched his head as he purred. The woman rose to her feet, holding the bundle to her side with one hand like a child with a toy, letting it almost drag on the ground. She lifted her head and seemed to be staring up at Megumi's apartment. The rain was too intense to tell for sure. The woman's face was hidden behind the blurring effect of the rain. She didn't scream again. Just stood there, listlessly, barely holding on to the bundle. Her head cocked to one side and rested there. Long black hair draped down to her waist. She swayed and Megumi feared she might faint. Megumi didn't know how long she stayed there looking at the woman in the dark. She had kept the lights off. What she did become aware of when the flashing lights of the patrol car came into the parking lot was that Latte was already asleep again on the bed. She watched as the car came into view and parked. She moved her gaze back to the streetlight, but the woman was gone. A cop stepped out of the car, dressed in a black raincoat. His partner joined him, shining their flashlights around as they made their way to the streetlight Megumi told them about. They walked past the light and towards the riverbanks beyond. She lost sight of them in their lights for a few moments. The downpour lessened to a drizzle. She could make out the shadowy lines of the river like a black gash cut out of the night. 2 lights shined out by the water. They came closer until the streetlight revealed the officers again. They spoke to each other and got back into their car. After a minute or two, the car pulled away, and they were gone. The rain came to an end. A few stars poked out from behind the storm clouds. Did they find her? Is she okay? Megumi knew they most likely did not find the woman. They came back far too quickly to have actually done anything of use. Megumi shut her curtains and went back to bed. Latte refused to budge and give her space to lay down straight, so she curled up into a ball at the head of the bed. Before she fell asleep completely, she thought she heard that cry one last time. A faint whistle of wind on the night. Then darkness took her. "I'm so happy for you," Megumi said, forcing a smile. "It's great, isn't it?" Reina exclaimed and clasped her hands together like she was praying. "I hope it's a boy. I've always wanted a boy. I mean, a girl would be nice too, don't get me wrong, but a boy would just be, a different experience, right? What do you think I should name him? I was thinking Kaito or Ryu. Are you planning on have kids anytime soon? Megumi tried to tune out the insect buzz of Reino's overenthusiasm, but she was losing that fight. Someday, maybe. The chime of the front door rang. Reina spun on her heels and ran over to the front of the store. Welcome! Can I help you find anything today? Megumi let out a long sigh, some relief at last. She moved to the back of the store and busied herself with opening up a box of new inventory and hanging the shirts on the ballet rod. Reina's voice filled the store, even all the way to the back. Megumi smiled as she noticed she didn't give the customer a moment to respond. It might not have been the most humane tactic, but Reina did hold the record for the most sales at the store. Holding people hostage with cheerfulness was a skill Megumi did not care to learn. The smile didn't last very long. Reina's words about having a baby cut open old wounds. She knew it wasn't her fault. She didn't know the details of Megumi's life, but still, she hated that bitch right then. She picked out an olive green dress from the box and took it out of the plastic wrapping. She stuck on the store's price sticker and hung it. The color reminded her of the hospital gown she wore 2 years ago. Combined with Reina's sickly, exuberant announcement, Megumi found herself back in a nightmare. Tachycardia, sustained heart rate above 160 BMP. The beep of a monitor. What was a soothing rhythm of reassurance a minute ago was now a frantic warning bell. Her own heart was trying to escape her chest, and blood was pouring between her legs and down into the delivery table. The stark contrast of wet scarlet and clinical white is something she could still see today. Every time she closes her eyes, in fact. Pain erupted from deep in her bowels. She felt like the baby was splitting her apart. Memories became fuzzy at this point. She could recall people running in and out of the room, medical jargon that was beyond her understanding being shouted out, the nerve-scorching pain, and the beeping. It rose above the rest of the chaos. Like an urgent call of distress, the beeping came in rapid-fire succession. Then it flatlined. One tone that didn't change its pitch. Then darkness. She was alone in that void. She could only hear that one sound. Taichi didn't stick around long after that. It wasn't that they hated each other, but they reminded each other of what they had lost. Every glance a slap in the face, every word spoken a tearing of the bandages. And Reina brought all of that back today. Megumi's chest cavity felt empty, as if all of her insides had been scooped out and replaced with heavy ice. She pushed the green dress down the rod and reached for another from the box. Reina came prancing back from the front of the store. Hey, you're looking glum. What's wrong? You know what really helps me when I'm down? Yoga on a grassy lawn. She nearly squealed these words out. But I don't think that would be good for the baby. I don't know. What do you think? Megumi sucked in a lungful of air in preparation to answer. But this was Reina. That would not be needed. She started talking about how she was going to go get her poodle's hair done later that afternoon, how she was going to go to a cafe, and how she was going to go on a date with her husband immediately after that. She walked away to take care of another customer, chattering away. It didn't matter if Megumi was there or not. All she needed was a listening ear, and Megumi was glad of it. She finished unpacking the box and took her lunch break. Headed out to the riverbanks with a tuna rice ball she bought on the way at the convenience store. A few hundred people were out walking the narrow alleyways, strolling the river that ran parallel to the city's main shopping area. Couples, families, foreign tourists, the more eccentric types. There was even a man who would walk his pet meerkat on occasion. She walked down a set of stones that led from the shopping arcade and down to the river. She found a spot on a stone bench under the Sanjo Bridge. Some privacy away from the crowds. The river was a leap away from the bench. It was as wide as a 4-lane highway, and the water ran quickly due to the heavy rains they've been getting. The sky was sapphire blue. A slight chill carried with the wind. Golden sunlight washed over everything on the crisp autumn afternoon. The temperature wasn't exactly low, but there was no escape from the ever-present cold air, one of Kyoto's finest traits, being situated in a basin. There was no escape from the heat in summer or the cold in winter, just as she had no escape from nightmares of losing her daughter 2 years ago, nor the more present worry. That woman in the rain. She hadn't left Megumi's mind since last night. What was she doing there, alone in the storm, and what was she carrying? Megumi took a bite out of a rice ball and then lit a cigarette. The city recently made smoking outside of designated areas illegal, but she was sure the few people walking by her wouldn't mind. She had seen a group of tourists, Spanish, she thought, smoking as they walked down the road, and nobody said anything, not even the police. Useless. I bet they saw her last night and decided they didn't want to deal with a mentally disturbed homeless woman. Megumi wasn't one to pry into the business of others, but she couldn't shake off the image of the rain-drenched woman, screaming and striking the ground. She needed help last night, and nobody gave it to her. Megumi smoked the cigarette down to the butt, threw it to the ground, and stamped it out. She got up and started to ascend the steps. She stopped and turned around, looking at the river. The riverbank stretched on for miles, but Megumi's place was nearby. The chances of that woman being here today was pretty high, she thought. Megumi scanned the people and quickly stopped. She didn't know what the woman looked like, so what was she looking for? Fidgeting and rickety steps? Fists striking the ground? Impossibly loud wailing? She decided then and there to help that woman. Tonight, if she ever saw her again. Megumi entered her apartment and locked the metal door behind her. Her arms were busy carrying 2 bags of groceries, and Latte was busy attacking her shins with his claws. She scolded him, but smiled. She set the bags down on a circular table, but the perishables way, poured the cat his dry food, even mixed in some meat she picked up special just for him. She didn't know what kind of meat it was, but it did say premium on the can, so it must have been good. The sun was a thin strip of red on the horizon, and the light filled her room in a vibrant haze. She walked over to the window and looked out at the river. It ran like blood. She shut her eyes to the unwanted image of the delivery table that came barging into her mind. A rumble of thunder over the mountains that shadowed the city interrupted those thoughts. Dark clouds were spilling over the peaks and heading for her neighborhood. She saw the curtain of rain falling in the distance. They were moving quickly. The storm would hit in minutes. She turned on the electric kettle, sat down on her pink beanbag chair by the window, and waited for the water to boil. The sun dipped fully beneath the mountains, creating clear gray splashes across the sky. It soon turned black as the storm clouds crossed the river and enveloped the apartment complex in a light rain. The kettle chimed. Megumi went over and prepped a cup of tea. Latte, a fat and old cat, had already run out of energy and lay in a coma in the middle of the room. Megumi distracted herself from thinking of the woman as she cleaned up the dirty pile of laundry and watched a singing contest on TV. Hours passed. She shut off all the lights and then went to bed. The ping of the drops against the roof were a soothing tapping rather than the clanging assault of the previous torrent. Maybe that's why she heard it this time. Not the screaming. She heard a woman's voice, speaking calmly, from somewhere outside her window. Megumi hadn't fallen asleep yet. She lay in bed wide-eyed. Though she couldn't hear the words, the voice was loud. Too loud to be heard, so clearly from outside. At first, she thought she might be imagining the voice, until the speaking became screaming. She sat up and went to the window to peer out. There she was, again, under the streetlight. The rain wasn't as thick as the other night, and now Megumi could clearly see that the woman was cradling a bundle to her chest. It was wrapped in a dirty white cloth. The woman was also wearing a white robe, or what was at one time white. She could see the red stains from her waist down to her ankles. It was bright and shone in the dark. She twitched her head to the side, her whole body shaking, her voice wailing. Megumi called the police again. They again said they would come out and look. She hung up, but didn't wait for them this time. She grabbed a flashlight from a box above her kitchen sink, threw on a raincoat over her pajamas, and slipped into her Crocs. She left her apartment and made her way outside to the parking lot. The rain let up some and became not much more than a mist. She could still see the streetlight from under an alcove of the apartment complex directly in front of her across the parking lot. The woman was there. She showed no signs of responding to Megumi's presence. The woman turned sharply to her left and stumbled into the darkness beyond the light. For a moment, Megumi hesitated. She could just wait for the cops to come. But what if the woman walked further away and they couldn't find her again? And she was bleeding after all. Megumi jogged across the lot and stood in the center of the streetlight's halo. She could see a shadow walking further away and down to the river. "Hey, wait, I can help you," Megumi shouted and then took off after the woman. She was facing the water with her back to Megumi, swaying side to side, arms out of sight in front of her own chest, clutching the bundle. Her crying died down to a pathetic whimper, like a dog might do while begging for food. "Miss, are you hurt?" Megumi walked closer. She didn't want to shine her flashlight on the woman and blind her, so she kept it focused on the ground in front of her instead. The mist came in sideways, bypassing her hood, and blowing directly into her face. She squinted against the rain, and the woman was now facing Megumi. I didn't even see her move. Megumi took one more step towards the woman and stopped. The smell of rotten meat filled her nose and her mouth. She gagged. Was it coming from the woman? She shined the light at the woman's feet. She was barefoot. The feet were bright red and dark purple and bloated. The woman's robe glistened with what Megumi could now tell was for sure blood. It was tattered and shredded. The blood rose to the lower half of her chest. The rest of the robe was white and clean, almost as if the woman had been dipped in blood by her head. In the gaps of the robe, Megumi could see her skin. Purple, green, red, bloated just like the feet, an exposed rib, and decomposing flesh on her forearms. The bundled and bloody object in her arms was in the shape of an infant. And her face. Megumi stopped breathing. The woman was missing her lower jaw. The tongue hung loose and flapped around like a necktie on a windy day. The eyes were milky white with no discernible iris. The woman stopped whimpering. Her head jerked to the river and then back to Megumi like the head of an insect. The woman, the thing, lifted the bundle up and seemed to offer it to Megumi. Megumi took a step back, almost tripping over a tuft of grass. The woman thing herself recoiled at Megumi's retreat. She screamed, a cry that froze Megumi's blood and brought her crashing to her ass. The woman lifted the bundle up and smashed it into the ground. Megumi heard a crunch and a snap. Then the woman was gone. Nothing there but light clouds of mist and the black and raging river beyond it. She picked herself up and fled back to the apartment. She flew up the stairs, not even waiting for the elevator, ripped open her door and locked it behind her. Lotte jumped in the air off her bed and scurried away behind the curtain. She tore off her raincoat and Crocs and dropped the flashlight on the floor. She turned off the lights and dove under her covers. She scrolled through her phone for somebody to call. The police were already on their way. But what could she say to them? Please help, I saw a ghost? No, they wouldn't believe her. She knew what she saw wasn't a person, not a thing that an officer could do anything about. She resolved to wait until she saw the patrol lights down in the lot and go speak to them directly. Maybe if they were there in person, it might make her case more believable. She waited in the dark for the flashing lights. Checking her phone, she saw that almost 30 minutes passed with her welded to her blankets. At least Lotte came out of hiding and jumped onto the bed and curled up by her feet, falling asleep immediately. She started to laugh a little bit to herself. Maybe she hadn't actually seen what she thought she did. Maybe she was just stressed out, hyped up on fear, being tired. The memories that Reina brought up, who knows? She almost convinced herself of that. That was until Lotte raised his head. His ears stood straight up and he glimmered with an alertness she hadn't seen him possess since he was a kitten. She could see his muscles tense even under all that fur and fat. There was an invisible electric charge. He arched his back and hissed at the window behind Megumi's head. There was no fire escape or any other structure like that outside that window. Nothing but empty space standing 3 stories above the parking lot. The fear took hold regardless. She imagined someone, her, hovering in the air, peering through the curtain and down at her. The street light cast a sickly light into the room, painting a white stripe from the left side of her bed down to the front door. This was something that had always annoyed her, but now she found some comfort in it, until she saw the shadow rise. The black thing stretched all the way to the door. Wispy tendrils of her hair whipped around the mass of the shadow. 2 arms rose from the depths, each sporting 5 gnarled and pointed fingers. The arms fidgeted and twisted like a stop-motion animation, missing a few frames. Lotte jumped off the bed and hid inside his litter box. Megumi gripped her comforter as if it was a life preserver. Her nails bit her palms even through the blanket. The woman thing spoke, but Megumi couldn't understand what she was saying. It was Japanese. The dialect was what she had heard only in movies about samurai and geisha and castles and lords. This was not the tongue for discussing fashion in the new bakery down the street. She made out a few words such as mine and taken, and that was enough. That was all she ever wished to hear or know from that voice, sweet and calm though it was. The woman began weeping. Her voice changed from gentle to rough. Her volume rose, and Megumi could understand that she was asking a question. Something banged against the window. The sound jolted her to her senses. Megumi jumped off the bed and turned around. She expected nothing to be there, just like a scary movie. The fake out of a cat jumping out of a closet before the scares got too intense. She wished she was in a horror movie. The woman was at the window. Megumi could see her haggard and hanging face with the loose tongue. The woman banged against the glass with her fist. Again came the words mine and taken and a possible give me. Megumi stood still for the most part, though she was shaking and whimpering. The woman disappeared. There was no fading away, no slow receding like the mist at sunrise. She was just gone. Then came the screaming, wailing, lamenting that tore through the walls of her apartment. Megumi double-checked that her door was locked. As fierce as it was, the crying didn't sound malevolent to her. It was filled with a pain that cut through her, both to marrow and to atom. Megumi cowered in a corner of the room. Latte wouldn't come near her. She sat in that corner, shivering and wide-eyed until the sun rose. Only then did the screaming stop. 2 days passed. Megumi fell asleep at work on that first afternoon. Caught a solid hour in the back before Reina noticed. She didn't sleep at all that night. The screaming continued from after sunset to sunrise. Her front door handle rattled, and something banged against it. The inside lock fluttered as if touched by an invisible hand. The second day was even worse. She could see the woman out of the corner of her eye at all times of day, no matter where she went. When Megumi went to look at her, she was gone. The woman appeared in the bath next to her. She was standing behind a set of skirts at work. She lurked in the dark corners of every alleyway and of every corner of every room. At times, her image stayed as if burned on the inside of her eyelids. The second night, Megumi's mind almost snapped. Things escalated beyond the screaming and the rattling of the locks and the just out-of-sight stalking. The woman appeared at her window and actually opened it. Megumi rushed over and slammed it shut. Then the front door lock unlatched and it opened. She saw a putrid leg, clothed in a blood-stained robe, step into her apartment. Megumi flew at the door and shut it on the woman. It seemed that even though she could be in Megumi's line of sight at all times, the woman couldn't pass through solid objects. That's what Megumi silently prayed was true anyway. After shutting the door, it was no longer the woman that Megumi heard. The cries that rattled the walls were that of a baby. The hysterical screaming brought her mind back to that delivery table, painted in her postpartum hemorrhage. The shrill monotone beep of the machine. The thing that disturbed her the most, though, was the progression. Night 1 was a banging at the window. Night 2 was the undoing of the locks. Night 3 was the woman opening entrance points and trying to come in. What would happen on night 4? Megumi's sleep-deprived mind latched onto these thoughts as she got out of the bus in Miyama village and walked toward her father's house. The tiny mountain hamlet was serene. No wind blowing, a clear and cloudless day. Thatched roof homes, rice paddies, and rolling hills surrounded it all. A single creek, overflowing due to the recent rains, raced through the center of the village. She walked past her father's open gate and up to the front door. She rang the bell and waited. Her eyes stung and her eyelids were weighing her down. She felt like vomiting and could hardly hold on to a clear, concrete thought. She had no one else to run to. No friends that would take her seriously. And Dad was always a believer in the supernatural. Maybe he would know something. The door opened. Dad was dressed in a green wool vest and dark brown slacks 2 sizes too big for him. His bald head was edged with fluffy gray hair. His small and powerful spectacles made his actual eyes seem even smaller than they really were. Megumi took the moment in, stunned at how much smaller her father seemed since, when was it, 3 years now? Hi, Dad. Hi. A moment of stilted silence. You want to come in? Yeah, thank you. Dad led her inside and offered her a cup of tea. She waited in the living room, sitting at a table. The light was dim inside. The windows were small, and Dad didn't like to flip on the lights until it got dark. It was musty and smelled of mildew. Dust specks floated around the cluttered living room, piles of clothes, even a bicycle, though it was missing one tire. She laughed at how similar they were. Neither of them could ever clean up very well. Dad came in with a tea tray that shook in his hands. Thanks. She grabbed a cup of tea and took a sip. The place, it looks nice. He hummed a response in his throat that Megumi knew to be a thank you or possibly an I know. Her father raised her by himself for most of her life. She had no memories of her mother since she died sometime when Megumi was a baby. Never got a straightforward explanation from Dad, and she knew she may never get one. He sat down. So, his eyes wandered around the room. You said you wanted to talk? She gripped the table's edge tightly. It was smooth, but felt like she might get a splinter if she held onto it harder. This is difficult to say, but I've been seeing something. A dead woman with a baby. She's been coming to me for 3 nights now, and I know you've always believed in that stuff, and I'm just scared, Dad. I don't know what to do. Before speaking, she felt like she was leaning off the side of a cliff. Now that the impossible was said, she waited for the impact. Dad cleared his throat and put his cup down, looking down at his feet. By a river? He asked. Yeah, how did you know that? You never got to know your mother. She used to pick these nice little chrysanthemums and lay them by your crib. She used to think it would protect you from bad health. Dad, what does this... Just listen. She died when you were still a baby, but you know what happened right after? I'd find those flowers in your room. Every single night for almost 4 years. I never doubted that it was her spirit looking after you. She was an Ubume. It's a ghost or spirit, I think, of a woman that dies in or after childbirth. I thought it was fine at first. I mean, she was your mother. But as the years passed, she started getting violent. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see fresh cuts on your arms. Soon the flowers stopped coming, but the cuts and bruises on you, and then on me, grew more frequent. You remember Saito-san, right? He told me this and took me to a temple to ask the monk more about it. We did a ritual. The poles and sheet down by the creek, you've seen those around town, right? We washed an incantation off the sheet into the water, and her spirit was saved from hell. Megumi wanted to write all of this off as a fairy tale, as a warped mind clinging to a fiction. But her father wasn't a liar and wasn't losing his mind as far as she could tell. After what she had seen by the river, though, she was opening to believing. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me any of this about Mom? And what do you mean, saved from hell? Why do you think I never told you? It wouldn't have done you any good to know, would it? And the monk, I forget his name, nice man. It was Tachibana or Takano or something. His eyes wandered off again, scanning the walls of the home, scanning for something Megumi could never hope to relate to. Sorry, what were we talking about? Hell, Ubume. Yes. The monk said the women who die without raising their children properly go to hell, like a hell of blood. Like a lake of blood, they get dipped into it over and over again. You understand why it's blood. She nodded. Delivery table, red and white, monotone beep. That's horrible, she said. Why punish them for something so stupid? It's not like they did anything wrong. She felt the fire rise from her belly and into her throat. Dad raised his hands in defense. I know. This is just what the monk said, so who knows if it's true or not. But all I know is that the flowers stopped coming when we did the ritual, and so did the cuts and the bruises. And I don't know why, but the people from Miyama see Ubume often. I don't know. It's like we're cursed or something. She let out a sigh, a release valve to the hot pressure. If that was Mom, she was being kind to me. The woman I've been seeing is... Tears welled up in her eyes. She's monstrous. And why me? Why is she coming after me? Some Ubume, the ones that lose their children, not just the mother dying, they are searching for someone to take care of their baby. This drives them insane. They are very dangerous. Their anger is a poison that infects everything around them. Maybe you paid her attention and that's why. Or maybe it's because of the baby. His face shriveled into itself. Megumi knew her father didn't bring up her stillbirth on purpose, but still, those words were a buzzsaw to her heart. Dad's face twitched, almost like he was about to cry, something she had never seen him do. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it. She smiled, as painful as it was to do so. His face relaxed and he nodded. You need to do the ritual, and whatever you do, do not pick up her baby. That's how she'll drag you down to hell with her. I'll call Saito-san and see what we can do. Dad, it has to be tonight. If we don't... She trailed off, thinking about that dead foot that breached her doorway the night before. One more night, one more step inside. In the corner of her vision, just then, she noticed her. Sitting in the dark corner of her father's living room, behind the single-tire bike, holding the bundle to her exposed breast, her flesh sagging in decomposition. She was rocking back and forth and humming a lullaby Megumi did not know. She did her best to not look at the woman, but kept her eyes on her father. Okay. He's retired and he's got nothing to do. We're old and rusty, but at least we have time on our hands. He chuckled, inviting her to do the same with his eyes. Megumi didn't have the heart to try. Night was almost here. Megumi, her father, Saito-san, and another elderly man, a Buddhist monk, stood on the banks of the river by her apartment. Dark clouds were gathering overhead, and the low rumbling of thunder spoke of horrors to come. Megumi watched as her father and Saito-san hammered the 4 wooden poles into the ground. They wouldn't let her help. The monk, she never caught his name, busied himself by writing characters onto a white sheet with his brush dipped in glistening ink. She could read some of the words. They were ethereal and muddled to her. Phrases like form is emptiness and emptiness is form and release from attachment, whatever that meant. Dad and Saito-san finished setting up the poles, each one slightly shorter than their height, and helped the monk drape the sheet up and between them like a tent covering, fastening the sheet with a rope to the poles. Her father slipped once while lifting up the sheet, and Megumi feared he would fall and break his hip. They finished erecting the structure from the river, and the monk began chanting his sutra as he gathered water from the river in a jug and then poured it out over the sheet. The fresh ink ran down the white sheet and flowed into the river. She was told that this was symbolic of the Ubume's earthly attachments and desires being released and purified. No matter how much water was poured on that sheet, a faint ashy black stain remained. She couldn't help but think about the delivery table sheets and wonder if the nurses ever got her blood out of them. Was that what happened to her? This woman? A purification of her desire to have a little girl to hold and love? Purification not in water and prayer, but blood and death? Bitterness swallowed her mind. Would she too be tossed into the hell of blood? And for what? Not bring in a life into this world? If this was true of the spirit that stalked her, then she deserved pity, not fear. She deserved vengeance, not salvation. The monk stopped chanting. The ceremony is finished. The Ubume has been appeased. Saito-san bowed his head in agreement. Her father smiled gently. How can we know for sure? She asked. The monk smiled with no evidence that it touched his eyes. Because the mantra never fails. Thank you for your time. Tanaka-san. About my payment. Dad took out an envelope out of his jacket pocket and handed it to the monk. The men packed up Saito's truck and, aside from her father, they drove off. Megumi agreed to let her dad stay the night, his insistence, just to be sure. As they both walked into the apartment, Megumi knew the ritual didn't work. The woman was there, across the river, watching them. Dad was asleep in Megumi's bed. She was sitting down on a futon she laid out for herself on the floor, wide awake, petting Latte who had fallen asleep on her lap. Rain had been falling for at least an hour. Megumi bit her lower lip as she searched the internet for more information about the Ubume. There were other rituals that could be performed, but if the sheet rite didn't work, she had no time or trust in the others to try them out. She remembered her father saying, "Do not hold her baby." According to ChatGPT, the purveyor of all wisdom, if she did so, the baby would grow heavier and heavier until it dragged her down to hell. And if you refused to hold the baby, depending on the Ubume in question, she might just murder you on the spot anyway. What was there to do? The screaming began. There was no more time to think. Her father did not wake up. It suddenly dawned on her tired brain that no one in her building was ever bothered by that screaming. Only she could hear it. But she heard it even before she first went to the woman and paid her attention. Was Megumi marked from the beginning? Why did it all start now? The shadow of the woman filled the window frame. Even behind the curtain, Megumi could see her rotting flesh, could smell the sour, rancid meats. The woman's now red eyes stared deep into Megumi's. She held the bundle, the child, in front of the glass, and then she smacked it against the window. Still, her father did not wake up. Megumi knew he would be of no help. He wouldn't even be able to see her. What would happen if she came inside? The window flew open. Her front door slammed against the wall, and Megumi saw that it too had been opened. Looking from window to door, the woman was in both places at the same time, in both places offering the dead child up to Megumi. She took a step through the threshold of the door. Her rotten foot kicked the crocks out of the way. At the window, she placed a rotting foot on the sill. The other came down next to her father's head on the pillow. Megumi saw the impression of her foot on the pillow. She wasn't just a spirit, she had weight. The next foot would come down on her father's head. Megumi had to make a choice. She turned toward the door and walked forward to meet the woman who was now fully inside the apartment, hoping this would stop what was happening at the window. The woman stopped crying. She jerked her head side to side as if her neck was broken. She stepped closer with the bundle raised. Megumi was going to name her daughter Sora. She was going to teach her piano, take her to France, hold her hand on her wedding day, and now she was going to hold someone else's child instead. Megumi reached out her hands. The woman's face, up until now grotesque, seemed to soften. The red in her eyes gave way to white. The open sores closed up. The loose tongue was now held up by a lowered jaw that appeared from nothing. With each step forward, the woman gained an ounce of life back. The smell of rot became thinner the closer that she got. By the time she reached Megumi, so close that they could touch each other, the woman did not look dead. She looked alive, cheeks red and skin smooth. She looked sad and desperate, but alive. She placed the bloody bundle into Megumi's hands and vanished into nothingness. The baby remained, bloody and dead and rank. It started crying. Its stiff rigor mortis limbs thrashed about. It grew heavy in Megumi's hands. She tried to let go, to let the bundle roll off her hands, but it was glued to her. Megumi fell to her knees. Fire burned in her elbows and her forearms. Her hands fell to the floor, still holding the child. She tried to lift them up, but she couldn't. Something in her elbow popped. She noticed Latte nearby watching her, meowing gently, unsure of what was happening, only knowing Megumi was in distress. Megumi yelled and screamed, something she had never done in her life before. Years of pain unleashed in a moment of primal agony. All she could hear in her mind was that damn monotone beep. She pulled harder and screamed louder. To her left, a crack opened up in the floor. Red light shone forth. It split open wider. What should have been room 204 below her was now a pool of blood. She saw writhing things in that thick red water. They were screaming, all of them women. Then she felt rough hands grabbing her own. It was her father. He was down on his knees in front of her, trying to wedge his arthritic hands under hers, but he couldn't. The baby was too heavy. They locked eyes, and she could see the tears streaming down his face. Her hands burned. Her heart ached. The pain of 1,000 losses piled up in her. A voice came into her mind. Let go. Be free of the pain, and fall into me. The pool of blood growled. It was hungry, and it wanted her. She knew in her gut then that if she let go, the thing in her hands would let her do so. But that would mean she joined those down below. It would take her down there. Her father pressed his hands more firmly into hers and shouted. He yelled with what little voice he had. She had never heard him raise his voice. Like father, like daughter. They both held on. She could see that it was hurting him too. The bundle lit on fire. The baby wailed and kicked its flaming appendages. Megumi's hands were scorched, pain like she had never experienced before. The fire burned her father's hands too, but still they both held on. Still together they were both screaming. Megumi felt another pair of hands cover hers. Soft hands, small hands. She heard a woman scream with them, not the Ubume. A woman's voice she had only heard once before on a VHS tape her dad showed her of his wedding day. And then it was gone. The bundle, the crack in the floor, the pool of blood, the woman's unseen hands. Dad was on his ass, covered in sweat, his hands a bloody and burned mess. So were hers. She embraced her father. He embraced her. She clung to his neck and sobbed. He joined her. Latte pushed his body between them and nuzzled their faces. The rain stopped. All was quiet.